I don't suffer from it very much, but that's problematic because when it does hit me, it clobbers me. And I don't realize I'm feeling jealous. Like I lose my sea legs and I have to remember. And Allie's really good about being like, no, you're jealous. And I'm like, oh. But then I'm a geek, so I'm like, oh. Like we've actually have a jealousy sighting. So for me, jealousy, so there's a lot of different ways you can approach jealousy. I like to think of it as well, first off, we live in a culture where we're supposed to avoid it. So most people are ill-prepared on how to handle it when it comes for you. And then
I guess before we start getting into this exploration of jealousy and polyamory and monogamy, it might be worth going into a definition of what jealousy is and how it might be different from envy. And Reid goes into this in later on in the video. But I like his definitions. And so jealousy is basically the idea that I'm threatened I might lose something to this person, therefore I want them gone. So, for example, if I am in a romantic partnership and person B comes along and I'm insecure and I feel like they might take my romantic partner away from me, I'm jealous of person B. I want them gone. Envy, on the other hand, is the idea that, ooh, I want that experience that this person is having. So like, let's say if I see person Y and Z over here, and they have this really wonderful, sparky, romantic relationship, I'm actually envious of them. I don't want them gone necessarily, because then I wouldn't be inspired by this relationship that I'd like to emulate. But I am envious of them. And I quite like that distinction.
You're supposed to like avoid it at all costs because jealousy will destroy everything. You know, and we have examples of like, you know, people killing, shooting people because they're jealous. Like, so like the stakes can be high, but I like to think of jealousy like asthma. And if you know people who have asthma, or if you have it, like they teach you like, know your triggers. And then you learn how to avoid your triggers. And then we can start like the process of inoculating you against your triggers. And for me, jealousy is more just like a signal that you probably have needs underneath that you haven't put into words and they're not getting met. So if you have insecurities, then the need is for reassurance, a particular kind. And if your partner can reassure you in that way, all of a sudden the jealousy, the asthma attack becomes less. It's not a guarantee, but at the same time, like I'm not one of those people that believes that you just eradicate jealousy forever. I
think one of the great things that Reid touches on is the idea of using jealousy as a signal that certain needs aren't being met. So, for example, if I start feeling jealous, rather than push it aside, which is probably the short-term easiest thing to do because it's probably harder to have a conversation with a partner or with a friend about why you might be feeling jealous. Instead, use it as a signal to say like, okay, there's certain needs that aren't getting met here. What are those needs? And do they need to get met by this one person? I think one of the tough things about monogamy is that, especially the way monogamy is modeled in our society, is that there's one person that has to meet all of your needs. A lot of my friends talk about the one, and that places a lot of pressure on the connection. And maybe it's a bit of a flex to say like, well, our connection is so good that it can bear that pressure of being everything to me. But I guess I take a bit of an investor mindset to relationships in that I like to diversify my portfolio a bit and get my needs met by different people. And it just seems to make a lot more sense to me.
I don't suffer from it very much, but that's problematic because when it does hit me, it clobbers me. And I don't realize I'm feeling jealous. Like I lose my sea legs and I have to remember. And Allie's really good about being like, no, you're jealous. And I'm like, oh. But then I'm a geek, so I'm like, oh. Like we've actually have a jealousy sighting. Now we can study it. And people don't get excited about getting triggered in that way. And so that your emotional IQ and your emotional kung fu you're not prepared for the stuff when things come for you. And it's going to come whether you're in a monogamous relationship, whether you're single and just having envy or jealousy at the workplace, or whether you're, dating, 5 people who sit in the second row.
So when I talk to people about polyamory, one of the objections I often get is, I'm just too jealous for that. So therefore polyamory isn't for me. I'm just going to stick over here with monogamy. It's much more safe. And I think the tricky thing is that jealousy is not uniquely a polyamorous thing. It might come up a little bit more often because there's no arbitrary constraints about one partner for each person. However, I think the illusion is a little bit dangerous in that in monogamy, there's this idea of like, okay, well, this partner is now exclusive to me. I own the rights to this partner. And the thing is that jealousy is a adaptive signal that your needs aren't getting met. And so if it's the case that I'm putting this dampener on my jealousy, then that signal about my needs getting met isn't getting out. And so over time, what will happen is I'm not learning about myself and what my needs are. I'm not learning how to have somewhat difficult conversations with people that are important to me about my needs and how they can possibly get met or not met by that person. And so it just kind of builds up and builds up and builds up like pressure behind a dam until one day you just kind of explode about some little thing. There's that old story about a couple fighting over who loads the dishwasher, and it's never about who loads the dishwasher, right? And that is probably because one of the partners haven't got their needs met. And so I think the idea of jealousy not occurring as much in monogamy or jealousy occurring more in polyamory, it shouldn't necessarily be considered a bug, but I think it could be considered more of a feature or a tool that one can use to learn more about themselves. And this is not something that necessarily has to happen in the context of a romantic relationship. It can happen in friendships, it can happen in professional relationships as well. And I think one of the great things that I've learned through my exploration of polyamory is how to advocate for my own needs. And I think all of my relationships have really benefited from that.